Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show on What's Happening at Work podcast. This is where we make resilience conversations possible at work. So, whether you're a leader, you are an employee, or you are in between, as long as you have a job, this podcast is for you. It helps us to look at what's happening at work, what can be changed, and what we can do differently to make work a more joyful and a more rewarding experience for all of us. We all know that stress at work is an issue. And today, my name is Joyce Odidison. If you haven't been here before, if you haven't listened to this podcast, I am host of What's Happening at Work podcast. And we try to stay on top of what is causing the stress, the burnout, the hardships that people are experiencing at work. And as a conflict analyst, I get to see those every day. And it's so important for us to talk about happiness at work. Why is it important? Why do we need to have happiness at work? Why is that something that people ask for? Like, work, you're supposed to work. Why should you be happy at work? Well, guess what? Today we have a guest. Todd Levinson is going to be here with us today, and we're going to talk about the things that make people have great conversations at work and how important that is to a well-being or happiness or mental health at work. So Todd, thank you for being here. Todd is himself is a former instructor. He has been trying to create world peace, and now he has a tool to help us have better conversations at work. Todd, welcome.
Thanks, Joyce. Great to be here.
All right. So tell us, tell the audience a little bit about you and what drives you to want to create world peace as if we have any war happening. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh man, where to start? Well, listen, I have been someone who values relationships for all of my life. I mean, we're social beings as human beings, and I think the research on happiness, well-being is pretty strong.
Yeah.
When you look at long-term studies of people who have happiness, who have physical health, so on both the mental and physical side, it's the strength of their relationships that are the strongest predictor of that happiness and well-being.
Mhm.
So conflict is part of life. Like,
Yeah.
we're all not going to sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya all the time. Work is about work, right? You do have stresses that are involved in getting stuff done, and not all stresses are bad, right? I mean, we
No.
stress muscles, we stress ourselves to grow, to strengthen,
Mhm.
to improve. So if anything, people get more meaning when there is some degree of challenge, and stress. And so we're
Mhm.
not looking for people to not, do work, but to the extent that they have relationships undergirding the work that they do, strong, close, meaningful, positive, constructive, even with
Mhm.
conflict,
Yeah.
relationships undergirding their work, they're going to do better work. They're going to stay
Yes.
longer.
Yes.
In terms of world peace at large, though I'm not working actively on it right now, I have done work in that realm, and I care very much about the conflicts that are occurring within societies, not just in terms of wars between countries. That probably goes back. I mean, it's probably a little bit about who I am, just in my nature. I've always been a kind of peacemaker at heart, but my grandparents grew up in the Holocaust. They were Jews in the Holocaust. They escaped, and so I got to hear the stories of what it's like. When a group of people are, um, scapegoated, talked about poorly, and obviously violently persecuted. So
Mhm.
there's probably some of my personal history that drives
Mhm.
some of my desire to not just create strong relationships, but also to ease conflicts in those relationships.
Yeah. That's really important. And it's funny as humans, we don't learn from our past.
Yeah.
We see what happens when you scapegoat a group of people, when you dehumanize a certain group, and but we just keep repeating the cycle. We haven't learned, so we have to keep saying it more often. So maybe it will, some part of it will sink in.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here, for sharing that. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now that's different from what you did before.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're building and getting out there a platform called Matter. Matter is all about building strong, close, productive, meaningful relationships,
Mm.
both in the professional work business realm as well as in the consumer friends, developed a great social network realm. And the
Mhm.
reason I think is for a few reasons. One is the horrible increase in loneliness, social isolation, disconnection, and
Mhm.
conflict, and the way that our societies have become polarized.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the antidote is building relationships that enable you to stop scapegoating, stop thinking that the other side is so horrible, right? Um, so that's one piece of it. I think a second piece of it is, there are a lot of changes obviously going on in technology that affect both the personal and professional realm, social
Mhm.
media and now AI. And my co-founder and I have a lot of concerns about the role of technology in creating disconnection and taking us away from the basic feeling of being human, both in
Mhm.
the workplace and outside the workplace.
Yes. Yes.
Um, Now, we think there are bottom line reasons to do this. So, when you look at the studies around relationships at work, I mean, there's a few things that we can say. One is that when people have a quote unquote best friend at work, they are more engaged. They have what we call organizational citizen behavior. So they go above and beyond for the people who are at work because they have a relationship with them. We go
Mhm.
to bat for the people we care about.
Okay.
There's increase in retention. Collaboration obviously is smoother, and that's for multiple reasons. One, there's just a better information sharing. There's a lot of people,
Mhm.
and you hear this from leaders and employees, where people are silent at work. They don't share the challenges that are occurring either internally or in the work projects.
Mhm.
And so when you have greater information flow, you can solve problems because you can locate problems, and you also can hear solutions. So collaboration, innovation are also improved. And, the research says best friend at work. Who knows what people mean when they answer that question? We're not looking for you necessarily to have your best friend in life at work. But certainly, if you have a set of strong relationships at work, you're going to do better work. You're going to love coming to work because you love the people you're working with. And it doesn't mean you don't have personality conflicts, that you don't have
Mhm.
conflicts of interest in the projects you're working on. Those naturally come up. They come up in all of our relationships,
Mhm.
even with the people, and sometimes even more with the people we love most, right?
Mhm.
What it means is you can work through those much more effectively. And so we're really looking to make work more human, but also um, achieve better performance through doing that. I think the last thing I'll say in that arena is that if you look at the reasons that people get let go of, or when they leave, the number one reason has to do with relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes relationship with manager, sometimes
Mhm.
relationships with others.
Mhm.
You let go of people who are not getting along with other people. Oftentimes it's not about work performance itself. And
Mhm.
so when we're talking about really retaining great talent, finding great talent, integrating great talent,
Mhm.
relationships are going to be the key to that. So those are some of the reasons why we're focused on what we're focusing on in the work, and this obviously applies in the personal space as well.
I like that your work recognizes the whole is holistic in terms of it looks at relationships in your work and in your life, because as a conflict analyst, when I see people come up to me or as a coach and they're struggling in one relationship, we tend to see that they take the same skills
Yeah.
and they have the same relational skills. And I have to say to my husband, relational skills are important, right? The way you relate to people is so important because that's what people draw meaning from.
Yeah.
Meaning comes from the relation, not what you say, is how we relate. And
Yeah.
that sometimes is undervalued in workplaces where people say, "Oh, I'm just here to do my work," or "I don't need to have friends." And when you look at the friends at work study, like you related to, it shows you that people are happier at work when they have friends at work. But there are a number of underlying reasons to that. Trust is one,
Hmm.
because when we trust people, we can communicate. We
Absolutely.
want to communicate with them. There isn't any barrier or hurdle to communicating with them. So that's a really positive piece. And then it's the same if you have a boss and employee. So usually when I see people, they're in conflict with their boss or conflict with their coworkers, you ask, where did the relationship break down? Right? That's the first question we want. Has it always been like this, or has there been a turning point? And you look at what the triggers are.
I mean, a couple pieces that I'll affirm and extend on. One, just to go back to the whole human idea, right? One thing I didn't mention about relationships is that, listen, there is a cost to people not being happy at work, right? That's the wellness piece. And so when you're thinking of your spend on mental wellness, on physical wellness, relationships are going to help with that. It's a retention play, it's a performance play, but it's also a cost reduction, not just through greater retention and not having to go through the hiring process, but through the general wellness. When people are well, they also just work better. So you're lowering costs and you're increasing productivity.
Yes.
So there is a bottom line reason to care about wellness. And if you care about wellness, you have to care about relationships, right? So that first piece that you said about seeing the whole person, I think is really important. When it comes to relationships, I mean, I think another piece that I'll say is that I loved what you talk about trust and communication. I think one piece that helps with trust and better communication is knowing the other person and know that they know you. And one thing that Matter does is we're not going to get together. And there's nothing. I used to run seminars. I love retreats. Okay. I love them. Okay. I will say I love them. I'm not talking down on retreats, but retreats also only happen a very small portion of the year. Yes. And anyone who's been in a retreat, and I used to train, run them for my life's work. And I can say this about my own retreats, is that when you go back to the quote unquote real world, right, there is a decrease in the feelings and all the things that you learn. Putting something into practice means putting it into regular practice, not just in the bounds of a retreat. And what we're doing with Matter is essentially taking that team building retreat and making it a regular process, a minimal but regular process throughout someone's work experience, so that they're continually working on their communication skills, getting to know at a deeper, important, productive level, who the people are that they work with, so that they can work better. Joyce, when you know me and I know you know me, I feel way more comfortable about working with you, and you know how to communicate with me. You know what's going on with me. You know how to relate to me in a way that's going to be more productive. So communication and communication skills and adapting those to unique individuals is so critical in the workplace, and we don't do enough there. So anyways, I wanted to affirm, what you were saying, because it's something that we care a lot about and think is super important.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to care about this to do this work. This work takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of passion. And those of us who have the heart for good communication, good relationships, it's a passion. It's a drive. It keeps us going. And when you think about those relationships at work and how important they are, because your relationship determines how successful you are in your career. Because everything is who you know and who you relate to. That's just how the world works. The more people you know, you see people and you're like, that person isn't that smart. How did they get there? They know the right people. They're not that skilled, but they're there because they know who knows them and who knows their abilities. Yes.
So true. And this is there's been a lot of debate around the whole DEI field, right? And I've had these conversations so much in the area of diversity with people who, feel like there can be unfairness at work. And a lot of times what I hear from them boils down, in their own words, to relationships, right? Yes. And so what you're also doing, I think, in building relationships across your organization is you're leveling the playing field in a way that doesn't feel performative, that doesn't feel so identity based per se. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's just a lot of pushback. But this is a way to equalize opportunity by equalizing relationships and those networks that you were talking about that play such a big role in advancing career. So I think it's so key what you just said, because there is a sense of unfairness when there's favoritism in relationships. I know I've had to deal with that as a manager, managing people and seeing favoritism and how much it depletes teams because they are sitting there with resentment, feeling of injustice and unfairness. And to some extent, that's true, right? Because again, like you said, relationships matter so much in work success and advancement.
It matters. And what happens when that resentment sits in, it starts to deplete people's ability to move forward, to think. And that's where our work comes in, right? In the resilience. And you look at the depletion, they start to feel no, 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 I'm not just resentful now. I don't want to participate. I want to disengage. I don't really want to be there. And that takes more energy now to force yourself to be there. Voice Joyce, I feel so sick. I don't want to be here. I puke on the way to
Yeah.
work. I feel
Yeah.
sick in my car driving to work. I sit in my car hyperventilating and trying to get myself ready.
Mm.
I motivate myself to actually go in and show my face to work at work. So all of this takes more energy and more depletion of people's day-to-day energy,
Mm.
which of course is where we start to see the burnout, and we start to see the mental health decline, and we start to see that anxiety and all the different things that happen when we start depleting our energy. Our brain starts overworking because they don't like me, and I don't trust them, and what I have to watch my back. And so we start this, those are the things, and this is where our currency of resilience comes in, and say, yes, relationship is so important, because without it,
Mm.
people are always on the alert. People are always worried and scared and feel they need to protect themselves. So they're not getting as much work done as you think, because they need to, because they're protecting themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, that's so true. And you know, this thing about resilience is what I loved about what you said is that resilience can also be asking for help sometimes. You know,
Hmm.
resilience can also be knowing your limits. And if you
Hmm.
don't have relationships to pick each other up when times are tough, then you as a team lose resilience. And certainly
Yes.
you lose it as an individual. You know, I had a flashback when you were talking. I was thinking about my wedding actually. My father-in-law, he is the kind of person, and you see this a lot in some company cultures, who's like, I am going to do everything, you know, and they just bust their butt, and you think they have so much resilience, right? Because they're not thinking about their personal needs, they're showing up for people, and it's a joy, you know, to have him in my life, because he's like that. And at the same time, he was working so hard to get things ready on the day of the wedding that he actually at some point during the wedding fainted, and they needed to have an ambulance come in, and he was
Mhm.
okay, but because the ambulance came, they needed to take him to the hospital during the wedding, and he had this grand re-entrance, and it was a wonderful moment when he came back. But listen, sometimes when we're trying to be so over resilient as an individual, this kind of breakneck culture of we're always showing up, um, we can break down, we can reach our limit, and that is a great cost for an individual and for a
Yes,
team and for a company
yes,
when you get
yes,
that. And so,
yes.
you know, relationships on one hand can help you build your resilience. We're talking,
Hmm.
that's in the opposite, when someone doesn't show up when they really can, because there's just a little stress, and it's like, oh my God, I can't handle it. But they
Hmm.
also can be there as a backstop when you actually really do need help and support and to work as a team.
I like that you brought up that point, and that is where our currency of resilience is based on the insight that resilience is a currency for life.
Yeah.
So that means, like any currency, you can build it,
Yeah.
you can spend it, and
Yeah.
you can deplete it.
Yes.
So it's the intelligence that we need to build to measure, map, and continue build. If you keep just expending, if you have a bank account and all you do is spend, well, you're going to be in a deficit. And so most people don't understand that you can squander away your resilience by being Mr. Goody for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you go on the airplane and they tell you you need the oxygen first before you give it to others. But we don't make it a principle of our life.
Yeah.
Right. So we
Yeah.
don't know how to balance resilience. We don't know how, just like a lot of people go through life and they've never had a budget, they've never balanced a book, and they do the same thing in every aspect of the life. But the currency teaches there are 9 dimensions of resilience. So there's
Mm.
the spiritual, the social, the emotional, you go to the occupational, the intellectual, the environmental,
Yeah.
the financial, and then the interpersonal,
Yeah.
right? So the
Yeah.
interpersonal sits at the core, and everything will come back to the way we relate to money, to people, to relationships,
Yeah.
to a team, to a workplace. All of that will come back and sit here in that relationship. So you that's why I find a lot of times in my research that people who relate poorly to their coworkers and their bosses tend to tell me, "Oh, Joyce, the work you did with me was so good. Can you help my spouse and I? Or my mother-in-law and I have that
Mhm.
same fight. Or
Yeah.
yeah, I had that with us." It's how we relate,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that relationship with self and others, we need to change, and that's where the transformation happens.
Yeah, yeah, and I want to get back to the idea of kind of a regular process of practice. One of the issues around trust, bringing it back to this idea of trust, is sometimes we have this fear of a lack of reciprocity, right? You
Mm-hmm.
talked about exchange of resilience, and there's also this exchange in relationship. And if I ask for help from you, Joyce, and I just keep asking for help, and I'm always asking for help, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
never coming to bat for you, there's that sense of inequality and imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we built into the conversations that build relationships and matter is an automatic back and forth. It's not me always talking. It's not you always talking. I get to know you. You get to know me. We
Mm-hmm.
share. We learn about each other. We build closeness through a back and forth that becomes a mode of interacting, right? It becomes a process of reciprocity, of going back and forth. And I love how you talk about how relationship is a basic skill that we bring to other parts of our lives. Sometimes those habits, they work well in certain ways, but they don't work well in others. The person who might have difficulty enforcing boundaries and being assertive, that probably also builds other skills of listening, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
accommodating, of being
Mm-hmm.
flexible.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an imbalance, right? And at some point, that imbalance is going to come out in the relationship where they have a need to be assertive and they don't know if they can. And the other person's so used to them not being assertive. It's like, whoa, you
Yeah.
mean you have needs? I don't know how to
Yeah.
handle this, right?
Exactly. Well, we
And
train
so,
people how to teach us, how to treat us. I train you how to treat me,
yeah, yeah,
right? And that's what a lot of people don't realize is that I create that scenario of how I want to be treated, and you
yeah,
just go on with it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I have a
absolutely.
responsibility to say to you, Todd, I think it's my turn now, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people lost their peace. And I love that you have a platform because we also built our platform
Yeah.
around the currency of resilience and teach people how to identify, map, see how well they're doing in all of these dimensions, where they need to work, and and celebrate where they're doing well.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there are some skills that you have and some areas of your life you're doing really well with, and you hadn't take time to celebrate and be grateful for that.
Mm, mm,
And then to move on to say, okay, but these areas, I want them to be as good as this area. And
yeah.
when we introduce clients to this model, employees, because we work specifically with different government organizations, all level of government, federal,
Yeah.
provincial, municipal, and employees will tell us, well, I did this. Now that I have a number, how do I change it? I don't like my numbers. How do I change it? So that awareness breeds some sort of responsibility to take action to transform and change. And that's what I think we're all trying to do in the workplace is create a better life. We work because we need to work to have a better life. But it's not just the money we bring home, it's the experience and the
Yeah.
things we learn at work that we can bring back to our families, we can bring back to our networks, and that makes it a richer, more meaningful life.
Absolutely. And I want to be clear here because there are cultures and companies that sometimes they don't there's two sides that I've seen. One is they hear this talk about happiness and they do what you talked about earlier where they're like, work is not about happiness. We're not we weren't formed as a workplace to promote happiness of the people who work. Like that's not our core mission, right? I understand that, right? On the other side, you get folks who are so focused on the wonderful workplace and sometimes they don't get to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't get, and you can only be happiness in your workplace as long as your work is sustainable, right? And you're
Exactly.
only sustainable to the extent that you're serving clients
Mm-hmm.
and actually making sure the bottom line is taken care of. So, they can kind of waffle between these two. And I think what's really important is that, listen, people are your resource.
Yes.
And if they're not happy, if they're not well, right? If they're not in some ways taken care of, just like any resource, they're not gonna perform. And I'm not suggesting just to see them as a tool, right? They're human beings, and I
Mm-hmm.
think, in fact, our work is supposed to get people to interact and relate to one another and see them as human again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they can feel happy. But what I'm trying to get across is, for the person who says we're not a place about happiness, there is a direct relationship between the state of mind and the state of being of your employees, and the relationships and the way that they work together, and your bottom line. And
Yes.
and on the other side, for those who are rah rah about happiness, yes, let's do happiness, but let's do happiness in a way that makes your employees, your contributors, and your teams better at doing the work that they need to do in a
Yes.
way that's impactful and efficient, right? So that they could get back to work, right?
Yes. Because it's called work for a reason. We have
Exactly.
to do something. There needs to be an outcome. You
Exactly.
can't just show up and be happy, ha ha ha, and then we leave and go home.
Yeah.
There, you have to contribute,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You
Which
have
is
to
why I love that
engage.
you focus on resilience, Joyce, because it's like resilient to do what, right? Resilient at the end of the day to get back and do the thing that you have a role in doing in your company,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
so
Mhm.
I love how you blend the good feeling sense of like, let's be well, let's be happy, with the
Mhm.
like, no, but it also supports you in like getting up and like getting shit
Yes.
done and doing it well and doing it better and growing as an individual. And
Yes.
um
And enabling those around you. Because sometimes when I talk to leaders, and I was like, your job is to develop the people around you.
yeah,
It's not to just yell and scream, it's to actually develop. Where do they need to develop right
right,
now? Because that shows, that builds resilience, that it builds the intellectual resilience, it builds that motivation, it teaches them new things, it creates a desire for them to learn and want to contribute. So we don't get away. It's a currency for life. We don't get away. The only thing that matters in life is how we're going to get through
hmm,
life, which we need resilience for, because all of us have to get through life. And some people get so beaten down at work, so abused at work, and so dis uh, just disillusioned with life from work.
yeah,
There are people who commit suicide because of work, or attempt to, people who've lost their mental health, people who lose their life at work. So work is important, but it should not cost you your life.
yeah,
So how do we be resilient, be continue to be resilient for the things that are coming at us? A client had, in my last newsletter, I talk about a client who had approached us for change at work. And I was like, well, everybody's going to respond to change at work differently. It's about time we change the way we provide change at work and see where people's resilience level. What does everybody need? What do you need, Todd, to go through this change? What do you need, Jane, to go through this change? Where do you need support? And how can we, with our limited resources, ensure that you're getting exactly what you want and not just the same thing for everybody? Because I might be doing really well intellectually, but emotionally, I'm not doing that well.
yeah, yeah.
So why waste money on me intellectually when I need the emotional help? And that's where we really look at it from that angle.
Joyce, what was the moment for you? So you were a conflict analyst. I don't know much about what got you into doing conflict analysis. I guess, what was the moment for you in doing that work that led you to be focused on resilience in this moment? Were there any moments along the way where there were aha moments where you're like, this is the thing that I need to dedicate my work and life to?
That's a good question. Now you're asking me a question. I'm the
I'm
interviewer.
curious.
but a good one to ask, because as a conflict analyst and working within government and complex organizations where the problem just keep moving around. Oh, you're not doing well here. We're gonna move you over there. Oh, we're gonna actually promote you, but not give you any employees, just so you get a title. But we can't have anybody work with you. I've seen so many of these situations where people are, and I would get, I would do the harassment complaints, the bullying. I would see people who genuinely have no clue about their relational skills and
Mm,
how to move past where they are stuck, because you can get labeled at work, and when
mm,
you get labeled at work, you are done.
mm,
Once you
mm,
get labeled, it sticks with you. How do I get out of this stuck position? How do I keep repeating the same conflict cycle? And that was really when I started mapping out the 9 dimensions, and I started to see, okay, this conflict is affecting all these areas of your life. Do you realize that it's not just what you say, it's the mindset behind what you say, because what you say comes
mm.
from somewhere else. And what produces that? And this is actually what got me moving. And we do a lot of work. Our company is called Interpersonal Wellness Services. So we do a lot of work in interpersonal, that looking at the interpersonal dynamics and how well it's working. And that's really what builds on. And as we start mapping how well people are doing in the various dimensions, we start to recognize the energy and
Mhm.
the resilience, the ability to be agile, innovative, creative, and dealing with the challenges of life and work. Some people are crushed by the smallest conflict or incident, and other people are able to bounce back and move back. So what's keeping them going? And that was really started my research and started me to go deeper and deeper into human resilience.
Yeah. There, you made me think about a study, and I'm not trying to compare ourselves. I believe it was cockroaches, in this study, but they did this really interesting study where, um, you'd get a cockroach. I think it was a cockroach to do a certain task and see how well it did in a little box. And then you would just put cockroaches on the outside. So there was like a social setting, and the
Mhm.
cockroach would do better. There's something about relationships that drive our energy. Now, some of it is performative, right? We
Mhm.
have reputation and status, and
Mhm.
there's something about
Status.
being
Yeah.
seen. Like, even if you put eyes on a screen, people will do
Mhm.
better, right? They'll
Mhm.
do. They'll also do good, right? They'll be more
Mhm.
ethical, right? It's like these eyes
Mhm.
are watching me. Um, and when you have strong relationships, it does add to this energy that you use the word energy. That's what made me think of it.
A
It adds
social
to this
being.
energy. Like, we do so much better, even just having someone in our presence. Like, alone, if you do something alone versus even just having someone there, just standing by your side, there's a
Mhm.
certain amount of energy that you get. Some of it may be you're trying to perform for that person. Some of it may be an inherent support where you can turn to them if you need to. Some of it just
Mhm.
may be able to talk to somebody. You're just talking, right? And you feel a sense of social well-being. There's something about presence of others that
Yes.
really that drives our energy. And when you have bad
Mhm.
relationships and you feel disconnected and
Oh.
conflicted, you feel alone, right? And you
Mhm.
don't do good. But besides the stress that just has on you, you just feel
Mhm.
alone and you don't do as good work. But when you have and are
Mhm.
surrounded by people where you got their back, they got your back, they're around, even if you're in a remote environment, because we do this, the platform is meant to be used also remotely. You
Mhm.
know that just a connection away is
Yes.
someone who's working alongside you.
Yes.
Um, so, anyways, I loved what you were saying about the energy that comes from relationships because it's visceral. You
It
feel it.
does. We are social beings at the
Yeah,
end of the day.
yeah,
And I often say this when I do keynotes. I said, remember, we went through a gestation period where we're connected to another human being for 9 months. That's how we were introduced to the world. They have to cut the umbilical cord after you're born,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then there is breastfeeding,
yeah,
there is the nurture. So we're not turtles. Turtles can just have their eggs and walk away,
yeah,
right? And the
yeah,
little turtles will come out and find a way. If you do that with a baby, it would never survive.
yeah.
We're not designed that way. And I think work needs to wrap more. I did a project with Miami University, did a mental health project for staff wellness in Ohio. And one of the feedback that the group was giving was, this is so human. It deals with all the 9 dimensions, the whole person. Work needs to come back and relate to the whole person,
Yeah.
because people show up with all their drama. They don't leave any part of it out. No matter how you tell them, leave your stuff at work, they come as they are.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize that at work, and recognize, I mean, so many employees come. I know right now we just did a statement of work. It's to employees, the kind of conversations they're having at work,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
unethical. It's it's exclusive. So it's those people are. But where's that coming from? What were they thinking? What kind of thought process is going through? So we're looking at that intellectual resilience, we're looking at that emotional resilience. What is it that you're not doing, you're not seeing, that this is wrong? Why do some people have that ability to know, well, this is not appropriate at work, they will come to that realization even before they open their mouth, while some people have to be reprimanded, and even after the reprimand they're still arguing that, what's the big deal?
Yeah, yeah. I want to double down on a couple things you said. One was you brought up the idea of a baby. There was that research around attachment, and where they worked with monkeys, right? And
Yeah.
one mother has the bottle, is giving the sustenance, right? Another is giving that warmth, that sense of nurturing, right? And the big insight was that the baby of course needs the milk, right, and will need to get that sustenance, but at the end of the day it's going to spend more time with the comforting mom. And I'm not
Mhm.
suggesting that the key to organizational performance are group hugs, right? But I think it's a good metaphor, and is really true to who we are as humans, as social beings,
Mhm.
when it comes to culture initiatives, because I see so many culture initiatives that are about, let me give you something practically that you want, right? And I'm not saying those things are important. Of course, salary conversations are important. Of course, flexibility at work is important. Of course, I don't know, the pizza days can be nice,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, spirit day,
but
all of those are
but the
important.
reason we focus on relationships is because that's what we seek as basic human beings, right?
Yes.
That's what that study teaches us, right? And you know, you talked about organizations earlier, and the visualization that I like to use, that I think is also appropriate, not just for what we do, but for resilience, is an organization is a connection of units, right? You organize units, right? People, other resources, technologies, all sorts of resources are
It's
connected.
a system.
And
Yes.
we've been in this world of connectivity for so long, and where
Mhm.
everyone thought the answer to the world is connectivity, right? And connectivity is important, but what's even more important is what you do over the lines of connectivity. And so imagine that all your people are connected. The question is, how well are they connecting, right? What
Mhm.
is the strength of that bond? If you imagine a bunch of dots and units and you imagine connecting them, you could have a bunch of weak, fractionated, conflicted connections,
Yes.
or
Oh,
you
I've
could
seen
have a
some of
bunch
those.
of strong, tightly bonded connections. And
Yes.
think about who's going to be more resilient. I mean, think about the resilience of your organization when you visualize
Mhm.
those two potential scenarios. So,
Same.
resilience through interpersonal wellness, performing, on matter through strengthening relationships. Like, we know this in our gut, right? And that's why
Yeah.
it resonated so much when we connected, and then are now doing this podcast, is because like we know it in our guts, and when we visualize it that way, we know the strength of bonds matter so much.
So much.
and
Yes.
and it's the foundation of an organization, literally what it should be, but we pay so little attention sometimes to it.
Yes, because we're so focused on all the other things, and we're looking at the outcome, and we're not saying that here's where we can improve to make that better. Because when you have happier people, when you have people who are positively connected, constructively able to deal with the changes that's necessary to grow the bottom line, then you're going to have a bigger bottom line. That's, at the end of the day, that's just the reality.
Yeah.
But most people cannot, they don't have the resilience in their thinking to say, this is what we need to do. It's like, this is where we need to go. And they're not asking, they're not, it's you know there is this there's this concept, the triple loop learning, right? Single loop is, oh, that's broken, let me fix it. Double loop, and this is egregious work. And a single loop, double loop says, oh, this is not working. I wonder what happened and how to fix it. And then there's triple loop that says, this isn't working. Who do I need to become?
Mm-hmm.
Or what kind of transformation needs to happen
Yeah.
in order for us to work better together? And I think that's where most people are stuck in single loop thinking. Most workplaces and leadership strategies end at single loop thinking. Some gets to double loop, but they never get to triple loop, especially when you're working with the big organizations that's driven by politics and policies and the media. And you find that people are always in some kerfuffle of change. They've never had enough time to reflect, to
Yeah.
say, who have we become, or who do we need to become to move to the next place? And that's what happens at work a lot of times.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Joyce, because your head went very much in the same direction than my head went. Because when you were saying people don't do that difficult work, the first thing that came to my mind is, and there's a hypocrisy there, right?
Mhm.
You're asking your team members to step up, be resilient, do work amidst challenge, but yet when it comes to really solving the underlying relational dynamics that undergird your you just want to do the easy thing. You want to have
Yes.
the pizza party. Again, nothing wrong with the pizza party, but the pizza party is assuaging symptoms, right? It's
Mhm.
making things feel better on the surface, right? And you're not going to have pizza parties every day to the end of your days as an organization, right? It's at the end of the day more efficient and impactful to say what's really going on with the relationships in my organization, right? Rather than throwing the pizza party, but it's harder and it requires
It
more
is.
resilience.
It takes work. It takes
Yes.
resilience, and you can't think about that because you don't have the energy. You're not. Resilience affects our ability to think clearly.
Yeah.
Poor decision making is a sign of low resilience,
Yeah.
and most people don't know that. And that's why I do the work that I do. Todd, we could talk all day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can reach me, personally at todd@matter.today. You can go to www.matter.today. I can also be found, Todd Levinson at LinkedIn, and would love to work with your organizations to help build strong, resilient, effective, connected relationships to undergird your relationship, your company, and all that you do as a company.
That's so amazing. It's been wonderful having you. This has been a great conversation. I'm sure we'll have a lot more conversations going from here. And if you are listening to this, send your comments. Let us know. Check Todd out. And this is Joyce Odidison. Thanking you for being here as we talk about what's happening at work. You know what's happening in your workplace. Send me a note. Tell me what's happening in your workplace and what topics do you want to hear to take your workplace to the next level. Build resilience for you, your people, and those you serve. Stay tuned for the next episode.